Here's the question. Is the U.S. government a child trafficker middleman? This would make them a pimp. You may recall that we had the discussion recently about whether or not the word pimp is allowed. Is that a woke word, or has it been replaced by something that makes it sound fun and good and acceptable? I'm going to use the word pimp until someone tells me not to. That is what one government whistleblower says. Tara Lee Rodas, a Health and Human Service whistleblower, gave her opinion statement on the child migrant crisis to the House Judiciary Committee on Wednesday. It is horrific. We are going to play you the video, and she doesn't get too graphic, so we feel comfortable letting you see it. And also just bringing this to your attention. This is from a hearing in the Senate called the Biden Border Crisis, Exploitation of Unaccompanied Alien Children. We're still using alien, so I guess I can still use pimp. The purpose was to examine the surge of unaccompanied children, and we call this UAC. So if I say that again, you know what I mean. Now, according to the Customs and Border Protection statistics, the number of UACs who arrive at the border has swelled from 33,000 in 2020 to more than 146,000 in fiscal year 2021 and 152,000 in 2022.
Jeez.
So, I mean, that is a big jump in numbers. So far in fiscal year 2023, we have seen more than 70,000, and we're not even halfway through the year. Here are some statistics from the last 10 years to just show where they're coming from. Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, Mexico, and then others. So most of them from Central and South America.
And by the way, most of them countries that we, the United States, have destabilized.
Yes. Now, this is an incomplete chart because it stops in 2017, but just look how it kind of steadily continues to rise. And then look at the increase in this chart from just unaccompanied minors alone since 2020. There seemed to be a bit of a dip right after the pandemic. That's probably because no one was counting, or we didn't know what the heck. People were staying home. And then just through the roof. Again, according to Customs and Border Protection statistics, the number that arrived just keeps going. And now the Biden administration is being accused of not even knowing where 85,000 children are right now. They just don't know. So let's let this whistleblower, she was a volunteer. She just thought, hey, you know, I see on the news there's this migrant crisis. I'm going to help come and process these children. She had this beautiful dream that she'd be taking these beautiful children and matching them with families who wanted children. That's not how it worked out for her. We're going to let it play. She has 5 minutes, so you know that's how long it takes, but we may interrupt a time or two. So buckle up, because this is a sad story.
Today, children will work overnight shifts at slaughterhouses, factories, restaurants to pay their debts to smugglers and traffickers. Today, children will be sold for sex. Today, children will call a hotline to report they are being abused, neglected, and trafficked, and we don't know if they're going to get the help they need. For nearly a decade, unaccompanied children have been suffering in the shadows, and I have to confess, I knew nothing about their suffering until 2021, when I volunteered to help the Biden administration with the crisis at the southern border. As part of Operation Artemis, I was deployed to the Pomona Fairplex Emergency Intake Site in California to help HHS, Office of Refugee Resettlement, reunite children with sponsors in the United States. I thought I was going to help place children in loving homes. Instead, I discovered that children are being trafficked through a sophisticated network that begins with recruiting in home country, smuggling to the U.S. border, and ends when ORR delivers a child to a sponsor. Some sponsors are criminals and traffickers and members of transnational criminal organizations. Some sponsors view children as commodities and assets to be used for earning income. This is why we are witnessing an explosion of labor trafficking. Now, whether it's intentional or not, it could be argued that the United States government has become the middleman in a large-scale, multi-billion-dollar child trafficking operation that is run by bad actors seeking to profit off of the lives of children. As for me, my interest is the safety of the children. I do not view this as a political issue. I view this as a humanitarian issue. I assure you, my motives are the highest and best. I want the children protected. So I want to tell you some of what I witnessed personally at the Pomona Fairplex. I saw vulnerable indigenous children from Guatemala who speak Mayan dialects and cannot speak Spanish. That means they cannot ask for help in English. They cannot ask for help in Spanish. They become captives of their sponsors. I have sat with case managers as they've cried to tell me the horror of what has happened to children as they make the journey to this country. I saw apartment buildings where 20, 30, and 40 unaccompanied minors have been released. I saw sponsors trying to simultaneously sponsor children from multiple ORR sites at one time. I saw sponsors using multiple addresses to obtain sponsorships of children. And I saw numerous cases of children in debt bondage, and the child knew they had to stay with the sponsor until the debt was paid. Realizing that we were not offering the children the American dream, but instead putting them in modern-day slavery with wicked overlords was a terrible revelation. A terrible revelation. These children are a captive victim population with no access to law enforcement or knowledge of their rights. They are extorted, abused, neglected, and that is why I blew the whistle in 2021. I witnessed firsthand the horrors of child trafficking and exploitation. My life will never be the same after what I saw.
All right, so she now goes on to say that she has hope, and she thinks that there can be certain policy changes, such as don't move so fast when a child comes in, and like just try and process them out, kind of like a, UPS package. She talks about transparency. She talks about, vetting sponsors better, because she says here that some children come in and sponsors are applying at various services to get children, almost like you go to the pound and you're like, I'll get some from that one, I'll get some from that one, I'll get some from that one, like commodities. Now, about this 85,000 missing children number, U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra said that he doesn't know anything about these 85,000 children. He basically shrugged it off when he was asked about it recently. Watch.
I'd like to know what you're doing to find the children and what you're doing to make certain that these children are not being trafficked.
Senator, first, those statistics that you've mentioned, as I said previously, in regards to another question by one of your colleagues, those are unfamiliar to me. I have no idea where those statistics come from, if they're based in reality or not. And we do everything we can to make sure any child, before we allow them to be released to a sponsor, that sponsor has been vetted.
Okay.
The vast majority of these children end up with a family member, immediate family member, as a placement. So some of those statistics that are being thrown out there that don't seem to be based in fact really would go contrary to what actually we've done.
It's a total lie.
Yeah. According to what the whistleblower says, yes, it is.
And also, I mean, they're not being placed with relatives. So they don't know who often they're just dropped there. They don't have any connection. Right. They don't have a family member. They don't know.
And like she says, it's not like they're speaking English or Spanish. They're speaking a Mayan dialect, and nobody speaks it to know, like, where'd you come from? Where are your parents? Who can we contact? So they can't even ask for help or say who their families are, if they have any in the United States. So yes, I mean, it does seem like the crisis was a lot more fun to talk about when we could blame it on President Trump. That's how the media feels, at least. But now that the Biden administration is responsible, it has become worse. Now, there are a few like lingering questions I still have about this testimony. And she says child trafficking has exploded. Obviously, it's really hard to get statistics about that, because if you're trafficking a child, you don't report it. You don't tell them where you're taking the child. These children can just disappear. They poof off of the grid. And then the piece, she said that the United States is responsible for recruitment in home country. So what does that mean? Like, what is the U.S. government's role in recruiting from these home countries? Well, we showed you the main countries, which were Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Mexico. I have major questions that I was not today, at least, able to find those answers. So I welcome your tips and clues, and if I can, follow a thread. But now it seems like this is getting big enough that even the New York Times is not able to ignore it as a fun thing to throw at Trump. They are saying that as migrant children were put to work, the U.S. ignored warnings. So there are clear signs that more than just this whistleblower knows this. More people know this. It's not something that, Secretary Becerra can just sort of say, like he literally shrugged like 8 times. Like, I don't know. It's not, sometimes you lose some
I
paperwork.
haven't seen those numbers. Yeah.
So this is a lot more serious than all of that. And this is just, for us, it's something that opens more questions than answers, but it deserves our attention. So let us know what you think of this story in the chat below.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.